Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 7 of the best aquarium plants for a low light aquarium. So basically what a low light aquarium is, it could either be a super densely planted aquarium and you want to fill out maybe the bottom part of that aquarium so there's not much light getting to that area, or it could be a super deep aquarium. It could also be an aquarium with lots of floating plants which restricts the light as well. Or obviously it could just be an aquarium that doesn't have super intense light or has a super short light cycle. So a lot of the time aquarium plants do prefer higher light environments, but there are definitely a few plants like the plants on this list that can thrive in those lower light conditions. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video with the first plant on our list. So as for our first plant today, we have a super cool looking plant. We have Bobitis. So Bobitis is one of my favorite rhizomial plants. It's super similar to Anubius and Java fern, and it's a really great plant for any sort of low light aquarium. So I keep Bobitis in a few of my aquariums. I've got a nice big boy in this aquarium here. I've had that one growing for a while now, and yeah, it's just an absolutely awesome aquarium plant. Not only does it look super cool, but obviously it thrives in low light and it also thrives in a wide variety of water parameters. But as for the water parameters this stuff prefers, you should try and keep it in a temperature anywhere between 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And a lot of the time you do want a pH anywhere between 6 to 7.5. In saying that, I have found that Bobitis is a great plant for any sort of black water or low pH aquarium. So this aquarium that I have it in now is relatively low pH. Obviously, as you can see, the water is very tannic just because there's a nice big log in there. And yeah, the Bobitis absolutely thrives in there and it produces pups, and yeah, it grows amazingly. So when you are keeping this stuff, because it is a rhizomial plant, it is important to remember you don't want to bury it in substrate. Burying them can actually cause rot on their rhizome, which can obviously affect the plant and it can just basically kill it. So it is super important that you don't plant this stuff in your substrate, but a great thing you can do with it is use it in scapes, or you can just put it on like rocks or wood. You can just glue it on there, or you can do what I've done and just like wedge it in between little ornaments. So as for the growth for this stuff, it's a relatively slow growing plant, but with time it can form a super nice lush like bushy little fern, and it's definitely a super unique plant to add into any aquarium just because of its fern shaped leaves. So as for the sort of fish you can keep this stuff with, it can go with any sort of small tropical fish. It can even go with goldfish and other sort of fish like that. The only fish I would steer clear from are things like African cichlids or other fish that are going to nip at it constantly. It is a relatively hardy plant because it does have relatively rough like leaves, but it definitely is very delicate if it is constantly being picked at. So yeah, I try and steer clear from any sort of fish like that. But yeah, with that being said, Bobitis is definitely a great low light aquarium plant, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to the next plant on our list, we actually have a moss. We have Java moss. So Java moss is by far one of the most hardy aquarium plants. It's great for beginners and experienced aquarists. It's just a super great, easy to care for, versatile aquarium plant. And one of the things that does make it great is that it can be kept in low light, and it actually does prefer being kept in that lower light. And most of the time you will find if you have it in super intense light aquariums, it does actually just shrivel up and die. So yeah, low light is definitely the best sort of environment to have it in. As for water parameters for this stuff, you can keep it in a temperature anywhere between 18 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 64 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And it can go in a pH literally anywhere between 5 to 8, so it's super versatile and super hardy. And it can also go with a wide variety of aquarium fish. So I love to keep this stuff with a lot of live berries and egg scattering fish. So the reason I love to keep it with live berries is because it does give a little refuge for any of the fry to go away and hide in and escape from the parents or other fish. And it's great for egg scattering fish because it can actually trigger spawns just because they love to spawn in nice bushy plants like that. It's also great for cherry shrimp and other nano fish just because it does give them a little area to forage around in and hide in. So yeah, it's it's definitely a great aquarium plant in general. This is another plant that doesn't really need to be planted in substrate. I don't even know if you could plant this in substrate. It doesn't really have like a root ball like other plants. And most of the time you either just throw it in your aquarium in a nice big clump, or you wedge it in little crevices, or you can, I guess, just stick it to rocks and things like that as well. It is actually a super fast growing plant as well, so you definitely want to make sure you are doing regular trimming, just because it can quite easily accumulate into a massive ball, which I mean isn't necessarily a bad thing. One thing I will say is that this stuff can be super annoying when you get algae in it. So over there in that tank, which I'm probably going to put up b-roll of, I've got like this nice big clump of Java moss, but it's just like absolutely infested with algae, so I don't really want to go in there and play with it. I'm gonna have to soon because it's getting out of hand. But yeah, I would just try and minimize the amount of algae that gets on it, which can be super hard, but definitely try. But yeah, with that being said, Java moss is another super great low light aquarium plant, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to the next plant on our list, we have another rhizomial plant. We have Anubius. So this one is probably the most common low light aquarium plant, just because it's readily available and pretty much all pet stores and fish shops have it in stock all the time. As well as that, it's obviously a super great beginner plant, so it is recommended to a lot of beginners just because it's literally impossible to kill. It is a super hardy plant. It's got super thick leaves, so it can actually go with fish like goldfish and African cichlids, but it can also obviously go with small tropical fish, cherry shrimp, things like that as well. So it definitely is super hard to kill this plant. And the only way you can really kill it is like the Bobitis. It is a rhizomial plant, so if you do plant it in substrate, it can get Anubius rot, which is super common, and that can kill your Anubius. So yeah, definitely try and not plant it in substrate. So as for water parameters for this stuff, I do find it can go in a wide variety of water parameters, but as for the water parameters I've had the most success with, I try and keep a temperature of around 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you should try and keep it in a pH anywhere between 6 to 7.5. So as for the growth for this stuff, it's another super slow growing plant. I mean, especially the like Nana varieties and Nana Petite, they're so slow growing. I've got this absolute massive specimen here, but that's taken quite a while to even get that size. I'm not even too sure what sort of Anubius that is, but yeah, it's slow growing. But I mean, with that being said, it is super great for low light aquariums, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to the next plants on our list, we have another whole group of plants. We have Crips. So Crips are a plant I don't have too much experience with, if I'm being honest, but I do know there's a wide variety of Crips. I definitely have kept them before, but not like recently. So Crips are super common to get in like those little tissue cultures. You can get things like pink flamingo Crips, Wendedii or Wendedii, I think, I don't know, it's something like that. And there's obviously a bunch of others. I'm not really a Crip professional. But yeah, these guys are definitely another super hardy aquarium plant. They're great for beginners, and they're great for any sort of planted aquarium just because they do spread pretty easily. So you could get a nice little tissue culture and plant them out evenly, and you might get like a nice big wall of Crips or a little like shrubs. What I do know about Crips is they do prefer like nutrient rich substrates, but they do fine if you're just like adding in fertilizers into like say sand and things like that. But they definitely do need a lot of nutrients to grow well in your aquarium. But as for the water parameters for this stuff, you're gonna want temperatures anywhere between 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're gonna wanna keep them in a pH anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5. So as for the growth rate for this stuff, I'm not too sure really, but I do believe it's a relatively slow growing plant. Most of the plants on this list are slow growing just because light is super like vital for a plant's photosynthesis, which is obviously how they grow. But because they're in lower light environments, they're not gonna get that often. So another thing I will mention is a lot of the time, if you do get these guys in a tissue culture, they can experience what's called crip melt. And what this is basically because they've been immersed grown in their little tissue culture, once you put them into a fully submerged or submersed environment, their leaves aren't properly adapted for that sort of environment. So those leaves are gonna melt back and they're gonna create new leaves that are properly equipped for a fully underwater life. But yeah, with that being said, Crips are another super great low light aquarium plant, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next plants on our list, we have a super cool plant, one that I absolutely love. We have swords. So like I said, swords are one of my favorite plants. I've got an absolutely humongous big boy growing in like my little sort of display tank over there. It is a green ocelot sword, I believe, and I got it like a while ago, and it's absolutely huge now. It produces pups every now and again, so it gets like this really nice long thing growing out of it, out of the water, and it flops over the aquarium, and it's got all these little like pups or runners on them. And I like to get those little bad boys and I put them in an immersed tub. I grow them up for a bit, and then I transfer them into my aquarium, and I've got one in there right now actually. So yeah, it's a super great plant to add, and I would highly recommend anybody getting a sword, green ocelot sword in particular. So this stuff is super easy to care for, and as for the water parameters you're gonna want to keep it in, it should be in a temperature anywhere between 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're gonna try and wanna keep it in a pH anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5. So as for the growth rate for this stuff, it can be like relatively fast growing. It's a lot faster than other plants on this list, but I wouldn't say it's like considered a fast growing plant. But one thing I will recommend to help promote growth is trimming a lot of leaves. So I've trimmed my sword so many times, and the reason for that is because it does get like little holes growing on the leaves, or if you've had those leaves in there for a long time, they can get a little bit of surface algae growing on them. So it's best to trim your swords, even though it can be painful to watch your swords get their leaves cut off just because they've been growing them for a while. It's 100% beneficial to cut your swords leaves off every now and then. But besides that, they're a super easy plant to care for, and they're super great in low light environments, so I would highly recommend them for a low light aquarium. Moving on to the next plant on our list, we have a super nice long plant. We have Valineria. So Valineria is another one I don't have at the moment. I have had it before, but I don't have it right now. But yeah, Valineria is a great little aquarium plant. I do believe there's native varieties from Australia, and I think there might also be some from Africa. I could be completely wrong, but there's definitely some from Australia. So this stuff is super fast growing. It's one of the fastest growing aquarium plants you can get, and a lot of those long leaved aquarium plants are, it's literally just sort of looks like seaweed or seagrass. It's a super cool plant, and it's a great plant to fill out like the back of your aquarium. So if you have a super ugly background, or you don't have a background, you can plant this stuff at the back and it will just create like a little wall of greenery. So it's a super great plant for that. And it's also relatively easy to care for. So as for water parameters, you're gonna wanna keep it in. You should have a temperature anywhere between 20 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're gonna want a pH anywhere between 6.5 to 8. So it is super versatile. It can go in a variety of pHs and temperatures, and yeah, it's just super easy to care for. It can also go with a variety of fish. So I have seen it being kept with African cichlids and goldfish, and obviously tropical fish as well. So if you do have African cichlids or things like that and you want a plant, I would highly recommend trying out Val. One thing I will mention, this stuff, like I said, super fast growing, and it actually grows by sending out like little runners or pups. Obviously it does like grow individually as well, so it grows super long, but it does spread very quickly as well. So you're gonna wanna trim the leaves often and trim the runners and pups just to maintain a nice little bush, especially if you don't want a nice big overgrown tank of Valineria. But besides that, Valineria is a super great low light aquarium plant, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to the final plant on our list, we have another one of my favorite aquarium plants, another rhizomial plant actually. We have Java fern. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best Java fern keeper. I'm not too sure why either. It just doesn't really grow well in my water. It does definitely grow and produce pups, but I wouldn't say it thrives, which is kind of funny because it is a beginner plant. So because this stuff is a rhizomial plant, much like the Anubius and Bobitis, you want to make sure you're not planting that rhizome in the like substrate, just because it can cause rot on the rhizome and kill your plant. So once again, you can stick it to any sort of surface in your aquarium and it should grow well that way. This is another super slow growing plant, so it's not gonna like explode in your aquarium. Over time, you will get nice big bunches of it growing, and it actually spreads by producing little pups on the leaves, which do eventually fall off and establish their own plant. So as for the water parameters for this stuff, relatively like normal water parameters, you're gonna want a temperature anywhere between 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're gonna want a pH anywhere between 6 to 7.5. But besides that, the only thing I would recommend is making sure to stay on top of pruning, so cutting off any dead or dying leaves or yellowing leaves, and obviously also making sure your rhizome isn't buried under the substrate. But with that being said, Java Fern is definitely another super great low light aquarium plant, and I would highly recommend it for any low light environment. So that is actually gonna bring us to the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I do hope I helped you guys find a nice little low light aquarium plant for your aquarium. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to go down and subscribe, and while you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I try to reply back to as many comments as I can. Also, make sure to go check out my website, aussiefishkeeping.com. I've got all sorts of rare guppies on there, got some Danios, botanicals, all sorts of aquarium products, and we're about to release some new fish on there as well. So yeah, I'll leave the link to that in the description. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in that next video.